right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3. Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello, how are you this Monday, February 3rd? Did you find a little respite over the weekend? Did you find a moment of zen? Did you find something that brought you joy? Friday night, was it Friday night? Yes, Friday night, my daughter and I went to see the new one-woman Frida Kahlo play at Writers Theater in Glencoe. I love live theater. I've mentioned it to you. I see, well, as much stuff as I can, all things considered. And I've got to tell you, this is a good one. Yep. It is, it's interesting. You know, Frida Kahlo, the artist, she was known during her lifetime mostly as the famous muralist Diego Rivera's partner. And it really wasn't until after her death that she became renowned in her own right for her art. But man, her story is just amazing. And it is beautifully, wonderfully portrayed by one woman who does the whole show. If you are inclined, if you're in the neighborhood of Glencoe, I strongly suggest that. I think it will remind you that people undergo tough times all the time. And they survive. Some good news to talk about today, and I'm going to try to talk about that. I'm going to try to work some good news in every day. It looks like all of our yelling at our Democratic leadership is paying off. You know, Donald Trump is turning over the reins of government to Elon Musk. I don't know how long it's going to last. You know, I kind of think he's letting Elon do the things that he wants to do, but Elon is now the lightning rod for it. So when Elon goes too far, and he will, Donald Trump can just say, well, you know, I'm pulling him back. You know, he meant well, but, you know, he went too far. And he will have accomplished a lot of the chaos that he wants to accomplish, and he'll be able to blame it on Elon Musk. I mean, this is the way the guy thinks. He's like, he's not an academic. He's not professorial, but he understands people, and he understands politics, and he understands the media. And if Elon Musk is willing to get out there and do all the unpleasant things and take the heat, well, as long as Donald Trump gets what he wants, why not? Why not? So there's a department of government called USAID. They handle all the humanitarian grants, you know, like how we help out if there's an outbreak of a disease and we can help inoculate children. If people are starving and we want to send them food. That goes through a department called USAID, and Elon Musk wants that department to disappear. He has no elected role. The only power he has is the fact that Trump backs him up on everything. Elon Musk, not only after some resistance, which resulted in some resignations, not only does he have now access to all the data from our Treasury Department, your tax returns, your Social Security number, the amount of money that you get from the federal government, either via Medicaid, Medicare, your Social Security payments. Elon Musk and his associates, who have been elected to no position, now have all that data. We've never done anything like this before. Turn over an entire government department's data to a private citizen. And Elon Musk has decided this U.S. aid, we don't need to give. Think how much money we could save. Think how many tax cuts I could have. We could spend more on defense. Yes, of course, I get millions and millions of dollars from my defense contracts. And think how much more of that I could get if we could boost defense spending, give billionaires a tax cut, and let's just get rid of this pesky U.S. aid program. Well, I'd like to think part of it was the phone call that Democratic governors had with Chuck Schumer last week, where they basically said to Chuck Schumer, okay, what are the Democrats in the Senate actually doing to resist Trump? A little bit later, I'm going to talk about Indivisible. They have a plan. It's a grassroots plan. How we can fight Donald Trump, how we can slow him down, how we can make life difficult, as opposed to what seems like has been the case up until recently, which is Democrats trying to pretend that everything's normal and that they can just keep doing the same things they've always done. And, oh, you know, people want us to work in a bipartisan manner. It takes two people. You have to have one person from each side of the aisle to work in a bipartisan manner. Democrats cannot work in a bipartisan manner with themselves, by themselves. And the Republicans, at least in Congress, have made it clear. They want nothing to do with any Democratic ideas. They don't want any Democratic votes, so I say we don't give them any. So today there was a big protest outside the offices of USAID, the USAID building where it's housed. By the way, the security guards there have been told to refuse admittance to any of the employees. There's a picture, I think it's in the Washington Post, of, you know, some employee with a backpack trying to get into the building, and the security guard is standing right there at the door. Yeah. So today, Jamie Raskin, our good friend Chris Murphy, Ilhan Omar, Andy Kim, a number of people went to the building. People in a position of power went to the building to hold a press conference to point out that this is not normal. This is not something we should just sit back and enjoy. This is something that needs to be fought at every turn. This particular action and this particular administration. Let's start. I'm going to share a lot of this, but let's start with part of what Jamie Raskin had to say today.
Elon Musk, you didn't create U.S. aid. The United States Congress did for the American people. And just like Elon Musk did not create U.S. aid, he doesn't have the power to destroy it. And who's going to stop him? We are. We're going to stop him. Elon Musk, you may have illegally seized power over the financial payment systems of the United States Department of Treasury, but you don't control the money of the American people. The United States Congress does that. Under Article 1 of the Constitution. And just like the president, who is elected to something, cannot impound the money of the people, we don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk.
Though I might argue we kind of do at this moment in time. We kind of do have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk, because Donald Trump is enabling him, and Republicans in Congress and in the Senate are doing absolutely nothing to stop him. So, he may not be elected. He may not have any well-defined role in the Constitution. But to say he's not a fourth branch of government right now doesn't really ring true. Two of our most outspoken representatives on Capitol Hill, Ilhan Omar and Chris Murphy, were also at this protest today, and they both took to the mic. Let's listen to that.
It is really, really a sad day in America. We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like. When you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power, that is how dictators are made.
This is a constitutional crisis that we are in today. Let's call it what it is. The people get to decide how we defend the United States of America. The people get to decide how their taxpayer
Paul, do you have Andy Kim?
Elon Musk does not get to decide. We are weaker today.
Okay. There were some other people who spoke today. New Jersey Senator Andy Kim was there. He's the one, remember, whose photograph went viral when he showed up January 7th to help clean some of the trash out of the rotunda. He was a congressman then. He's a senator now, replacing Bob Menendez, who, by the way, used to be the Democratic senator from New Jersey. But he's now going to prison for 11 years because apparently Democrats are very capable of holding Democrats to the law. Yeah, Republicans are not so good at it. He is accused of, well, he was convicted of a number of things, and he was just recently sentenced to 11 years in prison. You know, lots going on. Let's talk about the tariffs for a quick second. Donald Trump announced that there were going to be 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Apparently, the president of Mexico got on the phone with Donald Trump and basically said, dude, what do you want? Just what do you want? And there was an agreement that she would send, because, you know, this is all about the border. And because there aren't really that many undocumented people trying to cross the border. I mean, Joe Biden put a stop to that for all intents and purposes. So now his big thing is, oh, there's too many drugs coming across the border. Always something to do with the borders, because, you know, that's we like to hate those other people. We like to hate the people who aren't like us in this country, but we really like to hate the people who aren't like us and live in other countries. So now it's, there's fentanyl. Everywhere you turn, there's fentanyl. So the president of Mexico said, okay, we will move 10,000 troops to the border. And gosh darn it, they're going to be looking for fentanyl to the left, and they're going to be looking for fentanyl to the right. And so Trump said, well, I'll give you a 30-day reprieve. We'll see how it works out. But our neighbor to the north? Well, I guess Canada and Justin Trudeau, they're just supposed to suck it up. Because what? Trump's trying to show, I think he's trying to show what a tough guy he is. You know, by hurting Canada? Is that really what you voted for when you voted for Trump? You wanted us to go after Canada? Okay. After the tariffs were announced, Justin Trudeau spoke in a lot of what he's had to say has gone viral. I'm going to bring you part of what he had to say. There is, he talks in English and then he gives a sentence or two in French. I'm trying to remember when he says it in French, it's just like, that this is disrupting this historic economic friendship that we've had. That's not a word-for-word translation. That's the gist. So he speaks in English. He gives a couple of phrases in French. And he went on quite a while. I'm going to bring you the beginning of what he had to say. I think it sums up the whole message. Good God. We're going.
Good evening. Today, the United States informed us they will be imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States and 10% on Canadian energy. A decision that, should they elect to proceed with, should take effect on Tuesday, February 4th. Cette décision met en péril une relation économique historique. Une relation qui a été la source de tellement de richesses, de prospérité et de possibilités des deux côtés de la frontière. Tonight, first, I want to speak directly to Americans, our closest friends and neighbors. This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people. As I have consistently said, tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery stores and gas at the pump. They will impede your access to an affordable supply of vital goods crucial for U.S. security, such as nickel, potash, uranium, steel, and aluminum. They will violate the free trade agreement that the President and I, along with our Mexican partner, negotiated and signed a few years ago. But it doesn't have to be this way. As President John F. Kennedy said many years ago, geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. That rang true for many decades prior to President Kennedy's time in office and in the decades since. From the beaches of Normandy to the mountains of the Korean Peninsula, from the fields of Flanders to the streets of Kandahar, we have fought and died alongside you. During your darkest hours, during the Iranian hostage crisis, those 444 days we worked around the clock from our embassy to get your innocent compatriots home. During the summer of 2005, when Hurricane Katrina ravaged your great city of New Orleans, or mere weeks ago, when we sent water bombers to tackle the wildfires in California. During the day the world stood still, September 11th, 2001, when we provided refuge to stranded passengers and planes, we were always there, standing with you, grieving with you, the American people. Together, we've built the most successful economic, military, and security partnership the world has ever seen. A relationship that has been the envy of the world. Yes, we've had our differences in the past, but we've always found a way to get past them. As I've said before, if President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish us.
Yeah, what a thought. By the way, here's some goods affected by the Trump tariffs. Avocados, maple syrup, ground beef, cherry tomatoes, sugar, bananas, nuts, cooking oil, squash, cucumbers, strawberries, pineapples, Tonka trucks and Tonka toys, BMW, Audi, Nissan, Mazda, Ford, crude oil, beer and alcohol, lumber, steel, and even shoes. Get ready, kids. They're all going to get more expensive. They're going to get more expensive for you. And do you know why? Because a tariff punishes the people who buy the goods. If I'm a company and I import shoes from Canada and suddenly at the border I'm told that instead of $10, they're going to be what? They're going to be like $12.50. Do you think I'm just going to absorb that cost? Remember the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Remember the teacher trying to teach those loons about tariffs? Listen to this.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered, raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Hear that? The United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. I also read something, probably in the Wall Street Journal, a little blurb that said hedge funds managers, hedge funds, are convinced that there is going to be a huge stock market crash under Donald Trump. They are moving their assets accordingly to protect them. The people whose business 24/7 is to look at our economy and look at places to make money and ways to make money, many of them now believe that not just a dip, not just a little downturn, but a huge stock market crash is going to come our way sooner rather than later under Donald Trump. So yeah, are we tired of winning? Has there been enough winning? Can we go back to business as usual? $600 some days till the midterms. Honest to God, I'm now beginning to wonder what's going to be left when that midterm election rolls around. But you know what? Maybe what's happened with USAID was just the kick everybody needed. When we come back, well, the phone lines have been open, but, I've been yammering too much to take any calls, as I seem more and more inclined to do. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. And I appreciate the fact that you guys now know I go on and on. So the text line is on fire. But coming back, I'm going to continue to share stuff with you, but I'm also going to take your calls. So let's take a break.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Before I get to the phone lines, I want to share with you that this Wednesday at noon, Indivisible, allied with a couple of other groups, are going to be meeting at noon at the Federal Plaza. They're going to be outside of Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth's Chicago offices. They want to get some attention and deliver a letter to our Illinois senators demanding that they take action now to block Trump's nominees. No more business as usual. Members of Indivisible Chicago are going to deliver the letter to the senators' offices, and then they will protest outside. We are going to make ourselves seen and heard. We need everyone to join us. It's time to get our elected Democrats' attention. It's time to shut it down. Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at noon at the Federal Plaza. What is it that Indivisible wants the Democrats in legislative office to do? Oppose all of Donald Trump's nominees. No more unanimous consent in the Senate. You know, rather than, we're just going to pass this by unanimous consent. Okay, no objection, it's done. No, we're going to slow everything down. And whenever they try to bring a motion to bring something to a vote, Democrats are going to vote no. And they were at every opportunity that presents itself, they want Democrats to force a quorum call. Are there enough people to vote on this? And let's just take a roll call vote. Let's name them. Who's voting for? Who's voting against? I can't believe that it is taking grassroots action to suggest to our Democrats in power that they do some of this stuff, because I think this is really obvious stuff. Democrats are saying, oh, well, people want us to work in a bipartisan way. Not anymore. We don't, buddy. Not anymore. We don't. Marco Rubio was, of course, he looked so normal compared to Trump's other cabinet nominees. Got a huge vote. I think there was one person in the Senate who voted against him as Secretary of State. Marco Rubio is now going along with this whole idea of Elon Musk having access to the Treasury information, and this idea that Elon Musk should have the power to bring an end to a government agency. There are 10,000 people who work for USAID. Elon has decided that's not money well spent. Who cares if people go hungry? Who cares if kids die? They're not our kids. Oh, but he doesn't care about our kids either, because by stopping all the funding for research, all the funding for cancer research has been stopped. You may have heard that the funding for pediatric cancer research has been stopped. It's actually all cancer research. How does that do? Elon doesn't have a drug company. How does that do him any good? The grift is on, baby. And it ain't just Trump who's grifting this time around. Take a breath, Joan. It's only Monday. Pace yourself. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Jim is on the line from Chicago. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Joan.
How are you?
Hey, Joan. That's a great idea about Wednesday, because I think there's really need a succession of these things. But I was thinking of my late mother. She raised 3 kids. She worked for the federal government for about 30 years, and about 15 or 20 of those for OSHA. Very proud of her job there. Never swore allegiance to anybody, and this assault on federal workers. I don't know. Don't they have some kind of union? They must. The union representatives, I think, should be protesting also. Not that I know that Trump and Musk hate unions, and they.
Yeah, I know that government workers have civil service protections. Are they covered by SEIU? Is there a union that I'm not familiar with how that works?
I'm not either, Joe, but just to poke him in the eye, just to poke him and Musk in the eye, I think it would be good if they sent out a couple of memos of how they feel about disfiring workers willy-nilly and putting them. How in goodness name could they possibly fill the federal government workers with their loyal soldiers? They put the 1,600 people that he pardoned. They put them at the top of the pyramid. In fact, put them in front of the FBI. These will be our FBI agents now, as long as they have this twist that they're the patriots and we're the Marxists.
Yeah.
But I can assure you, my mother never thought of Marx or anybody else. She had 3 kids to raise, and she had to keep a roof over her head, so she was very proud of her job. And
yeah. Well, here's what I think, Jim, because I've been thinking about this. Anybody who listens to this radio station pays attention to what's going on in politics and in the world. But I think that we saw a lot of people voting for Donald Trump who don't really pay attention. They don't really care. I think there was a big contingent that thought, well, I'm not really, my life isn't getting any better under Biden. Might as well try the other guys. Not really having a clue about Project 2025. I think it was Jordan Klepper from The Daily Show went out after the election and talked to people who'd voted for Trump and would say to them, well, this is what's happening or what's going to happen with this agency or this budget. And people would look at him and say, really? I haven't heard anything about that. People are not paying attention to politics. They think that politics doesn't affect their daily life. And until the average folks start to hurt from this, like you and I can see that shutting down U.S. aid is going to have horrible repercussions around the world, to say nothing of the 10,000 employees that have been told you don't have jobs anymore. But I think that a lot of the people who voted for Trump, they're not listening to me. They're not reading a newspaper. Until they go to the grocery store and find out that a carton of eggs is $20 and they don't understand why, until they go to the gas pump, until their employer tells them that they're going to reduce their health care coverage, until what Donald Trump is doing. Maybe they're going to go buy a car, and a car that was, $10,000 in 2024 is suddenly $15,000. And they're going to look at each other and go, why? Well, that's when I think that a lot of the people who voted for Donald Trump are going to understand what they did. And not until it makes them miserable, not until they lose their job, not until a friend of theirs gets deported. And, I'm starting to see the comments. Oh, I didn't think that's what it meant. There was somebody who posted on social media. It was one of the programs that Musk wants to cut. No, I voted for Trump. My family needs that program. I didn't think they'd cut that. Oh, dear God in heaven. If I have to spend 2 years listening to I didn't think they'd do that, well, then you know what? You weren't paying attention.
But, Joan, remember this. Kamala Harris is going to look into corporate greed, and I can guarantee you under the mask of these tariffs, corporate greed is going to sneak in. They're going to look at an opportunity to make a couple extra bucks across the board, no matter what the item is. And we'll never know how much profit they're making and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We were going to look into it if the Democrats would have taken the White House. But they're certainly not going to look into it. And real quick, Joan, is TikTok, with the people, the younger people I talk to, 40, all they look at is TikTok, and they tell me crazy stories. Oh, Biden was a puppet. He goes up and down like this. They're actually doing the animation themselves. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, well, my God, didn't you see January? Didn't you see the ex-president say we don't have a country if we don't fight like hell to get it, and it incites a riot? You didn't see that? You only look at TikTok? Didn't they have it on TikTok or what? I can't excuse anybody who voted for him, Joan. I can't excuse anybody for it. God forgive me, I just can't do it because this is the United States of America, and I'd like to think that I'd like to travel south through Alabama or wherever the heck I'm going, and I want to be respected as an American. I don't want to be a MAGA. If I'm not a MAGA, am I going to get into a physical confrontation with somebody? I mean, I'm serious. We can't live like this, Joan. But that's a great thing on Wednesday, and thank you, Joan, for taking my call, Joan. Thank you much.
Thank you for calling, Jim. Yeah, what she's talking about is an alliance of groups, including Indivisible. They're planning to meet at the Federal Plaza noon this Wednesday. There are 2 letters that they are going to give, because the Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin have offices there. They are going to drop off letters that say basically, we want you to fight. We want you to be a thorn in Trump's side. We want you to use every procedural measure you've got to slow things down, to make things difficult. And that's what you should be doing. And then after the letter is delivered, there's going to be a protest at Federal Plaza, 12 noon this Wednesday. Let's take a break. We're going to get back to more calls right after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
And a lot of you are texting in about the tariffs. Somebody sent me in a picture of lumber. Lumber is one of the main things we import from Canada, other natural resources and some crops, but lumber. And you know what that means? That means that the Canadian companies that have the lumber, when they try to, send it to their regular buyer, U.S. lumber company, the government steps in and says, oh, wait a minute, you were going to sell that lumber to the U.S. buyer company for $100? No, my friend. I'm raising the tariff. It's $125 now. Well, you know what? And Donald Trump somehow thinks that this money is going to end up somehow in the Treasury. U.S. Builder Company says, well, gosh, I guess I have to pay $125 for this lumber now, but I'm not going to eat that cost. When I use this lumber to build you, Joe Smith, a house, I'm going to say, yeah, I quoted you this price of $10,000. Yeah, it's now going to be, $12,500 for the exact same thing. And so guess who pays the tariff? The Canadian businesses don't profit if there's an increased tariff. The companies that buy the goods, they don't want to lose out on 25% of whatever profit they were planning to make. So the price increase gets passed along, and you and I will be going to Lowe's saying, yeah, I want to build a back deck. I need to buy some lumber. Well, Guy, we're really sorry. You probably should have bought this lumber 6 months ago because you would have saved yourself a big chunk of money. Now that the tariffs are here, so sorry, but we have no choice but to raise the price. That is, and you know what? I think Donald Trump feels that most of the people who vote for him, as I said, they are not the ones who are breeding. They are not the ones paying attention to politics. They think politics doesn't affect their daily life. So Donald Trump knows that they'll listen to him. They'll see his comments. He's just going to tell them over and over that tariffs are going to benefit our Treasury, and he's just going to assume that they buy it hook, line, and sinker, that they have no idea. Somebody, Paul, back in the studio, just sent me a screenshot of an email he got from Menards. Save more money at Menards. Public notice, don't wait. Buy your lumber today. And you know what? If you depend on the stock market for your retirement income, you might want to hedge those bets. Because people who follow this stuff religiously, the hedge fund managers, were quoted in the Wall Street Journal as saying they expect a stock market crash under Donald Trump. Let's go back to the phone lines. Our good friend Roosevelt is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Roosevelt.
Joe, thank you for taking my call, my friend. Okay, I got a couple of questions for you. Then I'm going to give you some things that I heard from you guys and other. Don't know if you guys know it or not, but there's a big protest in the Latin American community. My son, as a matter of fact, goes to a high school. He as as a protest against ICE, they let them go early. His high school is approximately 90% Latino, specifically, more specific Mexican American, including my son, of course. So he was let go. A lot of the Mexican American businesses have closed. They're paying their employees the day as a protest not to shop at any stores or any restaurants that are Latino. So there's chains of supermarkets that are still staying open. Not everybody is agreeing with this protest or these.
Interesting.
And yeah, so if you look it up, it's all over the media in Spanish. That is, in the city of Chicago specifically. So that's one thing I wanted to say. But what I wanted to ask you, do you think that Trump is pulling a bum rush, first of all, and a three-card Monty at the same time? And then let me tell you why I think so. 2 weeks. Has it been 2 weeks? Seems like 2 years.
It is 2 years. It's 10 years. It's 20 years.
Okay, 2 weeks. Now, let's examine what everything has happened. Let me go backwards. The president of Mexico agrees to send 10,000 troops for the fentanyl. Okay, but didn't this happen already under Biden? That's an extended question to you. So basically, it's nothing new. At the same time, he agrees that he's going to watch over, because the president of Mexico said, you got to stop the flow of weapons to this country. Now, I don't think he's going to keep his word, because all these Republicans in the Senate, in Congress, and including himself, received from the NRA billions of dollars, millions of dollars for their campaigns. So he's not keeping his word, and that's why. Why is it just 1 month? That's my question. It's like he wants to fix something that he started and come out the hero. That's my opinion. All right. So what I'm saying to you, and I'm making this too long, but what I'm saying to you, there's so many things that are happening at the same time, negative and positive in the country of the U.S. And one of them is the stock market went down. It's plunging. Now they're predicting inflation. They're predicting a stock market crash. I don't know much about the stock market, but if it keeps on going like this, you just mentioned it, Canada, lumber, that's houses. That's houses that are going to cost more to build them. So I believe he's doing the same thing at the same time, so that Elon Musk gets into the Treasury. I'm connecting all these dots. Gets into the Treasury and does what he does. Now, you guys mentioned it. For the first time, a private citizen is watching over the Treasury. That means all these, like Social Security, and as an example, all these things he's watching over because they want the cuts. So I think all this is happening by no accident. And notice, it was so ridiculous to put a tariff on our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the south, so that we put more emphasis and more intention of news on that. While Elon Musk does what he does in the Treasury. He's not the treasurer. That's point number one. And point number two, to add to it, didn't they just ban a bunch of people from press, including NBC, MSNBC, and Rachel Maddow? That I don't know too much about, but I thought I heard something about that this morning. So all these things, Joan, are happening at the same time. He's playing the three-card Monty. He says, look over here, look over there, look over here, while they do all this other stuff that's not hardly even being reported. What do you think about all that I gave you?
Yeah. I think that we have a lot of work ahead of us. I think that I want to ask you something, Roosevelt, because I know that one of the big demographic areas that voted for Trump I was told, was Hispanic men. What is going to have to happen for those Hispanic men to say, I made a mistake, I'm going to vote differently next time? my theory is that it has to be personal, that unless it affects them, their job, their house, their wife, their husband, their kids, that they're not going to really understand the damage that's being done. I think most people don't pay attention to politics, and until something that politicians do impinges on their life, then that's when they sit up and take notice. What do you think, Roosevelt?
I think that you're 100% correct when you mention it week by week. By the way, I tell my mother, and what you say, I tell my mother. Joan Esposito has been saying the same thing that you said, but my mom says it in a different way. She says that these guys have to be hurt. They got to get hurt. They got to hurt them in the pocket. Not only the pocket, the fact that people are being deported from their own families. Now, funny you mentioned this because I've seen so many videos on social media, particularly what you said. I've seen a Cuban guy born here, Cuban descended from Cubans. His wife, they came to his house and ICE grabbed her and took her away. Why? Because she's Venezuelan. Why? Because of TPS. And examples like that, I'm going to repeat it again. TPS, it's affecting people that are married. That nobody thinks about that because not necessarily because you're Cuban, you're not going to marry somebody that's Venezuelan or somebody that's Mexican or whatever, Latinos. Okay, so the point that you have been making on a weekly basis, and I pay a lot of attention to what you say, because I totally agree, because you have to wake up the people that vote the least, which are Mexican Americans, Latinos, with the exception of Cubans. They got him in there. They could get him always in there because of the state of Florida, Cuban descendants, and they did it again. Now, funny that you mentioned the same subject, back to the men. It's not only the men. I've seen young people, like your daughter and my daughter are about the same age, okay, crying on social media, crying because they voted for Trump, and their family members, meaning their uncles, are being deported as we speak. So you're absolutely right. I agree with you. They have to be shaken up. They have to be woken up so that they see what they did. They see that they were taking advantage of it. Trump took advantage of them. Trump used them. And there's so many examples I've been seeing that have been reported about Latinos that they are sorry that they voted for this guy. I think they're waking up. But it's got to start with the young people because the older people don't vote. The older Mexican Americans, I'm telling you the truth, they don't vote. They have the concept of both parties are the same.
Yeah. And I don't know. Something's gone seriously wrong in our country if people really truly believe that. And I think you're right. I think they really truly do. Roosevelt, I've got to get to the news. I know there are some people on the phone lines. Don't worry. We're going to continue to take your calls for another half an hour. And, wait a minute. Is it time? Is it up already? Dear God, Paul, what's wrong? Paul Shivari, tomorrow is going to move me along faster. I apologize. We're going to coming up. We're going to talk about the budget with the only guy I've ever talked to who makes it fun to talk about, and that's Bobby Kogan. We'll be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by Bobby Kogan, Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress, and one of the few people who can make a conversation about budgeting interesting. But I don't think we have to worry about that today, Bobby, because I feel like we're in the middle of the Hughes or Eaton or Pacific Palisades fire, speaking metaphorically about what is going on in government. I mean, President Musk seems to be in charge. Bobby, what do you think when you see all this stuff about getting access to Treasury data and deciding apparently on a whim that we don't need U.S. aid anymore? Phooey those starving people who are dying of diseases. Good God.
Thank you so much. Yeah, good God is right. Thank you so much for having me back on. People only care about the budget when things have gone profoundly wrong in the world. And as you say, things have gone profoundly wrong in the world. I mean, whatever, right? The administration has been running for about 2 weeks now, and it's hard to – I think I don't have enough fingers to count the radical things that have happened just inside of the budget issue area. Most recently, as you said, Elon Musk got access to the Treasury payment system, and it seems as if he is illegally stopping the processing of payments that we have already locked in and already agreed to on a whim because he doesn't like them. That causes us to violate our contracts. It is profoundly illegal, and it is deeply corrupt for the world's richest man, who may or may not even be a federal employee, who definitely isn't abiding by the ethics requirements for federal employees, to be unilaterally deciding what payments he likes and what he will allow to go out.
Would this normally be the sort of violation that the Justice Department would step in and try to put a stop to?
I believe so, but I think you're alluding to the fact that the Trump administration has also fired a lot of people at the Justice Department. I mean, and I'll just say, I mean, for the folks listening, it's not just me who thinks that this is bad. I saw on Twitter earlier today a Republican who used to work, for Republicans on the Hill, who now works at the conservative think tank, the Tax Foundation, calling it a constitutional crisis. And then that was Alan Cole, and then Brian Riedel, who also used to work for Republicans on the Hill, former Heritage guy, works at Manhattan now, also called it a constitutional crisis, right? So anyone who can kind of get past their own deep partisanship can see that this is extremely uncommon and extremely bad.
In the past, it seems like even if the bulk of the members of the same party would prefer to look the other way, there have always been a few voices. I'm thinking John McCain. If you want to go back further, I'm thinking Barry Goldwater, people who were very partisan. But when push came to shove in a situation like this, they would stand up to their own party and they would say this is wrong. I have not heard a single Republican talk about Elon Musk and his inappropriate actions, his inappropriate takeover. Where is the loyal opposition?
Yeah. It's particularly bad because it completely usurps Congress's power here. The way that it is supposed to work is that the Congress writes the laws and the president carries them out. Now, of course, we all understand that the president can help push policy and help shape how laws will be written. But at the end of the day, we have it where if the president doesn't like the law, then they can veto the law. And if it gets in anyway, or if it was passed under a previous administration, they can try to change it. But you can't just not follow it because you don't like it. And what we've seen is even the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Tom Cole, basically giving deference both to Trump's illegal deferrals and pauses of government spending and of Elon Musk's illegally failing to process the payments that we have already locked in. It is completely usurping their power to say, yes, we passed a law. Yes, we dictated that you must do this, but we don't care. You can just do whatever you want anyway, whether it's because they're afraid, whether it's because they actually like this secret path to carrying out policies that they wish they could have gotten done but couldn't find the votes to do. I couldn't tell you, but it completely undermines their own prerogative, their own power.
And you would think, I understand that people who get elected to Congress and get elected to the Senate, they like those jobs. Those are good jobs. A lot of people are nice to them. They get to be kind of famous. They usually make a lot of money. You want to do, in some respects, what you have to do to keep that nice, cushy job. But at what point does the calculation change? At what point do they worry less about Elon Musk using his billions to primary them? And the fact that even if they would be primaried and survive, they have now ticked off so many of their constituents that they're in danger of losing their seat anyway. At what point do they worry more about the voters than they worry more about being primaried?
Sure. So I think a couple things going on. One, we have to look at kind of the enormousness and the badness of what Trump is calling, right? So on last Monday, a week ago, at 6 p.m., they released their memo calling to pause a third of the budget, right? I mean, basically our nutrition assistance, a significant chunk of our health care assistance, our housing assistance, and then it was a little tough to figure out exactly what they were calling for, but it looked like maybe the education assistance as well, right? A lot of the critical things that the government does when you think of us being a normal, good, functional society, they cause to kind of pause all of that illegally. And within 43 hours, they had not only walked it back, but they had so thoroughly walked it back, they pretended that they had never even said that in the first place and that we had all misinterpreted them. So clearly there was a lot of pushback from Republicans internally about that, right? Externally, they were all pretending maybe they hadn't seen it or they still had to get up to speed on it. But internally, it was very clear that they were pushing back against it, so much so that the Trump administration walked it back. I think right now we're competing against additional harm to their constituents. And then also, I mean, their own self-respect, right? Like to your point, they like these jobs and they do it in part because they like how powerful it makes them. And at some point they really ought to have some self-respect. And I think then you have to decide for the individual members, are they actually even if they lose their power, their kind of effective power here, are they secretly happy that Trump is illegally, unilaterally carrying out the agenda they always wish they could have carried out, but maybe didn't have the votes for? Or are they, I don't know. I mean, what we saw when Trump was president the first time was that very few people were willing to go against him before they announced that they were no longer running for re-election. After they announced they were no longer running for re-election, plenty of people were willing to attack him, but very few were willing to do it beforehand. And of the few who were willing to kind of strongly attack him beforehand, I believe every single one ended up then losing the primary or dropping out later, then deciding, oh, okay, I guess I'm not running for re-election. There might have been one or two, but basically all of them either waited until they were on the way out or pushed, and then that was the end of their careers. So everyone will be eyeing that. Trump still holds a very strong has a very strong grip on that party.
Bobby, this isn't a budget issue, but I just want to get your take. When the nomination of Pete Hegseth to be head of the DOD was voted on, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Mitch McConnell voted against him. Now, some people believe that now that Mitch is removing himself from leadership and maybe not even going to run for re-election, that he's sort of free to do whatever he wants to do. But there's a more cynical group that says he's smart enough to know the vote count, and he could basically put in a protest vote knowing that it really wouldn't derail the nomination. What do you think of those two theories? And maybe you have a third theory I'd like to hear.
I think given that he voted no and they were only one vote away, if McConnell had really wanted that nomination killed, he could have done it. And so I think we should view this as McConnell wasn't interested in actually flexing kind of all of his power. I do think that he actually was against it, right? I do think that was a genuine thing. Like Mitch McConnell is one of the people who actually is most pissed at Trump for messing with all the doing all the illegal impoundment that he has been doing. He's an old school appropriator, and he doesn't like that Trump is usurping his power there. And he's a big defense hawk, and he wants someone competent at DOD, which Hegseth is not. That said, he's a party guy, and he was someone who enabled Trump while secretly and sneakily being, not really liking Trump, and then sometimes being more open about not liking Trump. He was someone who enabled Trump again and again and again and again his first term, and yes. I think we should view this in the same way.
And I believe he endorsed Trump when he was running this last time.
Yeah, he's a party guy. And he doesn't like Trump, and I think he really was unhappy with Hegseth's nomination. And also, I guarantee you he could have flipped a vote if he really wanted to. And instead, he waited till the last minute to kind of, put out his statement because this was about him rather than about actually stopping Hegseth from getting through.
Yeah, and
at least that's my read.
I really thought that we could count on Joni Ernst, the Republican senator from Iowa, to kill Pete Hegseth's nomination while it was still in committee. But clearly, some sort of pressure was brought to bear on her. And to me, that's where Mitch McConnell could have stepped up. I mean, he may not control the purse strings the way he once did, but, Mitch McConnell knows who to call to get your re-election campaign funded. And he still has lots of friends with deep pockets. And I think he could have called Joni Ernst and said, I just want you to know, you got to look at this however you do. But if you decide that you're going to stop this nomination, I just want you to know that I and my donors will be there for you should Elon Musk try to take you down. He could have done that. He could have done a million things. I'm like you. I think that, this was kind of a thumbing his nose to Donald Trump, but of course not in a way that had any real consequences. Right. Classic Mitch McConnell. Right. I'm talking to Bobby Kogan. He is with the Center for American Progress. He's the Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by Bobby Kogan, who's the Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress. In a previous life, Bobby was in the Biden administration as an advisor to the director of the Office of Management and Budget, an office we are hearing more about than I ever wanted to hear about in the news, Bobby. Let's start with the basics. The Office of Management and Budget. What does it do?
Yeah, so it used to be the Bureau of the Budget. They are responsible for putting together the president's budget request. They are also part of the process of executing, of carrying out the spending that happens in the United States. They, Treasury agencies, they're all part of the process of making sure our dollars go out on time to the people who are supposed to get them and that sort of thing.
So give me a real-world example of that process.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll use when Trump illegally messed with the process in 2019 as a good example. So in 2019, Congress appropriated money. They said, okay, here you go. Here's money for Ukraine to have Javelin missiles. They were going to buy it from us, and then we were going to replenish our stocks. But basically, it was for Ukraine to get Javelin missiles so it could help protect against a potential future Russian invasion. And so what happens is Congress appropriates the funding, and then the next step is that OMB is supposed to apportion the funds. They're supposed to
say,
okay,
what does that mean?
agency,
They write the checks?
Yeah. Apportionment is about making sure that the money goes out on time. It is about making sure it doesn't all go out too quickly or go out too slowly. You don't want to end up like, let's say you're 11 months into the year. You don't want to say, oh my God, we're 11 months in the year and we've actually already run out of money. But you also don't want to end up at the 11 months in and say, oh my God, we've actually only spent half our money. So apportionment is all about making sure that it's going to go out on time. And that it comes from an 1870 law as kind of the precursor, and then they've since kind of refined it a little bit. But OMB is supposed to make sure the money is going out on time and kind of do oversight to make sure that it's all working correctly. And what Trump did last time and what he's doing again this time is he has gotten, normally that's done by career civil servants. Instead, he has his political appointees come in and refuse to release the money unless it's working the way they want. And so what he did last time was they refused to release the Ukraine money. And meanwhile, this money was for DOD. DOD starts frantically emailing OMB saying, we are not please release the money, because even though Congress gave us the money, we're not yet allowed to go about using this money until you release it. And that was when we had the whistleblower, right, where they kind of had shown very clearly. That was Trump had the quote-unquote perfect phone call with Zelensky. Yeah, where he says, I'll release the money, but I want you to do me a favor, though. And that favor was creating a sham investigation into his political opponent to help him win his election. Yeah, terrible, corrupt stuff. But so OMB is supposed to be part of this process for legitimate good reasons. But instead, under Russ Vought last time, who was the OMB director last time, and by all counts seems like he will be the OMB director this time, pending on how the vote goes. That was how they kind of got into the process and messed with money going out the door.
Yeah. So
that is right. That is the right response, right? It is actually extremely bad. It's a way of ironically centralizing power inside of the White House, taking power away from the agencies and away from Congress, saying, even though you passed a law, and even though we signed it into law, even though we enacted it, you still may not carry it out, or else you're breaking our apportionment law, which, by the way, carries criminal investigation. So what he's saying is, hey, agencies, if you try to follow the law, you're going to jail.
And again, are there states' attorneys, U.S. attorneys who can say this isn't how it worked? Do we have to rely on the DOJ? Because I'm not so sure they're going to save us.
Yeah, for this one, the state attorneys general can sue, right? So basically you have to find someone who has been harmed by the money illegally not going out. The money is supposed to go out. There are multiple laws saying that when Congress funds a project, you have to actually do the project. There's the authorizing statute, there's the appropriations statute, and then there's the Impoundment Control Act. And so Trump violates all of those. And so anyone who is harmed by the money not going out will have standing to sue. So, for instance, a lot of our money is supposed to first go to states and then be distributed. So, like when Trump illegally when he called to pause a third of the budget, he theoretically was calling to pause SNAP benefits, right? Nutrition benefits, SNAP and WIC, and those go through the states. And so when the states didn't get their money, they would be able to say, hey, federal government, you owe me this money. And that would go to court, and the court would be like, yeah, you're right, the federal government does owe you this money. And then they would presumably win. But part of this is the chaos in the meantime, right? Like Trump can undermine all of these laws. So currently he's pausing most of the money from the Inflation Reduction Act, the green energy part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and the bipartisan infrastructure law. And states theoretically are on the hook, and if they just kind of pause, or if a company was gonna contract with the federal government but then says, you know what, it's just I'm just not gonna try to work with the federal government anymore because I don't trust them for the next 4 years to deliver. Even if I think I would eventually win in court, I'm not going to do it, right? All of these, the chaos is kind of part of the point, even if they eventually lose.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was suspecting, that even if most of it gets shot down in court, there will still be some of it that gets through. And I don't know if it's, if they're just figuring, like throwing enough spaghetti against the wall, sooner or later some of it's going to stick. I wanted to talk to you, too, about, there's this talk that Elon Musk has effectively shut down U.S. aid, that some 10,000 employees have been basically told, you don't work here anymore, don't show up for work. The money that agency usually gets and spends, would that go back to Office of Management and Budget?
No. So it seems as if Elon Musk, so I'll just say really fast, they are taking a multi-pronged approach to try to illegally stop money from going out. One way that they're trying to do it is by illegally pausing at the agency level, saying, hey, agencies, stop doing more obligations, stop doing more awards and grants. Another way they're trying to do it is pausing at OMB level, saying OMB, mess with the apportionment process. And another way that they're trying to do it is they're having Elon Musk go in and even after the agencies have locked in a contract and then sent it over to Treasury to say, hey, Treasury, you need to pay them now. They've fulfilled their end of the contract. Time for the money to go out the door. Elon Musk then is personally intervening and refusing to process these payments, which causes the U.S. to default on our contractual obligations, but also stops the money from going out the door. And it seems as if that final path is what Elon Musk is trying to do for USAID, right? That he's trying to basically prohibit its functioning by being a backlog at the very end by stopping processing these payments. Again, profoundly illegal, causes the United States to default on our contractual obligations. If you are someone who wants to assess the risk of owning, of like doing trying to enter into a contract with the United States government, having Elon Musk have unilateral power to illegally turn it off is something that should be a mega red flag for you, but stops the money from going out the door. And in fact, there was an email today. I mean, it's not just that they're pausing the payments. It really seems like they're going fully into it. There was an email today, I think I saw, saying that all of the people should just stay home today and not go into the headquarters, and that they would get further guidance later. Yeah. And most of the labor lawyers who've been weighing in on this, because, a lot of federal employees got those, hey, just, go resign and we'll give you a big buyout. We'll pay you till September. Labor lawyers are going, no, don't do it. You're never going to get paid. It's not how it works. Bobby, thank you so much. You are always a voice of reason with stuff that is so complex for most of us. Thank you for being here. Joan, thank you so much for having me back on. It is always a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a regular Bobby Kogan segment. Now it's time for the budget with Bobby Kogan here on WCPT. We'll figure that out off air. Thank you, Bobby. Bobby's the Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
You may have heard that Ken Martin from Minnesota was elected head of the DNC. We're starting to pay attention to that race. Ben Wickler from Wisconsin threw his hat in the ring. One of the people who originally wanted to be in the running for that job was New York State Senator James Skoufis from New York's 42nd District. He dropped out of the race and threw his support behind Ken Martin. Ken Martin, isn't somebody that we have a huge familiarity with here. Ben Wickler, of course, our neighbor to the north, is somebody we know pretty well. So we invited James Skoufis to join us and talk about this newly elected head of the DNC. James, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Happy to join.
So tell us what impressed you about Ken Martin and what we need to know.
That's a great place to start. And as you led with on this segment, I think there were a lot of folks who woke up yesterday and read the news about the DNC chair's race, asking themselves, "Who is this guy? Who is Ken Martin?" I've gotten to know Ken, the new chairman of the DNC, pretty well over the past several months. I think it's fair to say. I was in the race for about 2 months or so in the 3-month-long process, and we did so many forums together, more than I'd like to admit, and certainly saw each other at events. We had many conversations, and then certainly over the last several weeks, I was supporting him and was part of his campaign team. And look, the thing that people need to know first and foremost is that don't let the Minnesota nice fool you when it comes to Ken Martin. He is certainly a man of integrity and a gentleman, but he's a fighter on behalf of the Democratic Party. This is a guy who statewide in Minnesota is 25-0 as chairman. 25 wins, literally 0 losses statewide as he was, at the helm of the state Democratic Party in Minnesota. And someone may say, well, Minnesota is a blue state. Wisconsin was more of a swing state. Let's be clear. When he took over many years ago, Minnesota was electing U.S. Senate senators as, Republican office holders. They had a Republican governor in Minnesota, which was, quite the norm. And he turned a purple state into a reliably blue state. And so, this is a guy who knows how to take the fight to Donald Trump and the Republican Party, and someone who comes from the working class. He was the son of a 15-year-old mother. Spent many days, many nights, many years of his livelihood in, working poor conditions. Literally was in his car at times growing up, sleeping in his vehicle with his family. And so this is a guy who knows what it's like to struggle and knows what it's like to fight your way into the working class and middle class in America. And that's the approach he'll take to the Republican Party as DNC chair.
I know that for many years, the DNC chair, their main job, and it probably still is the number one job, is to fundraise for the party. But we seem to be in a position where we want that job to be bigger. We want that person to be an advisor. We want that person to be a leader. We want that. Maybe we ask too much of that person. We kind of want that person to figure out how to get the Democrats back in power, how to make sure people understand what we're doing, and what are the important things we should be doing. Has it gotten out of hand?
To your point, I do believe, and Ken Martin believes, that we do need to reimagine the role of DNC chair and the DNC as an organization writ large. Yes, of course, fundraising and making sure that we have the resources to run effective campaigns and run those campaigns, by the way, intelligently, which, I think there's a lot to be said about what that looks like and what it needs to look like moving forward. But it does need to do a lot more. And Chairman Martin, he's committed to, certainly as one person, as chairman, doing everything he can to make sure that we pivot to a culture of permanent year-round organizing. We pivot to a culture that empowers not only the 448 DNC members and using their talents and skill sets, many of whom are, quite frankly, unempowered and disregarded within the organization, but empowering our local committees, our state committees, our partnerships with organized labor, and moving that sort of that gravity of power away from the D.C. consultant class. That is really at the core of the problem at the DNC organizationally, is that we listen to these D.C. consultants who tell us where to not show up, where to not compete. We literally write off 43 out of 50 states every 4 years because we've listened way too much to D.C. consultants instead of rebuilding our benches and beginning to expand the map across the country. So Chairman Martin is hell-bent on reorienting away from these unsuccessful, harmful past practices that have been ripping off our party, that has resulted in these losses that we saw this past election, and reimagining the role of the DNC. And here's the last point, and it's very important. And I mentioned this, and you alluded to it. He's one person. He's also going to elevate and empower folks like Ben Wickler to make sure that we've got an army of intelligent and savvy and well-organized individuals across this country that can bolster that change in culture and get us back to winning. Because one person can't do it by himself or herself.
No, they definitely can't. Why did you choose Ken particularly? Because there were a number of good candidates that wanted to lead the DNC. What was it specifically about his personality or his track record that appealed to you?
So I think knowing where I come from politically helped inform me and will help your listeners understand why I made the decision that I did. I come from a district that Donald Trump just won by 12 percentage points. A district of a little over 300,000 people. I won re-election by 14, a 26-point swing from the top of the ticket to the state Senate race that I ran in. And in fact, he's won my district 3 times, Donald Trump. And so, I know what it's like to be able to walk into a room where, the folks who have assembled, knowing I'm a Democrat, look at me when I walk through the doors as if I have 19 heads. and I know how to go onto and I know how to go onto Fox News Radio, Brian Kilmeade's show. I went on a couple of months ago as part of this campaign. We need to be showing up everywhere again. We need to be going on every type of media outlet, new media, older traditional media, legacy media. We need to be competing in every corner of this country. I am living, breathing proof that we as Democrats, when we do it right, we can be winning in a lot more places than what we're winning in right now as a National Democratic Party. And so what drew me to Ken was that he knows how to do exactly that. And we had a lot of conversations about, yes, reforming the DNC, which organizationally, we touched a little bit about it, desperately needs reforming as an organization. But he was most in sync with me, I believe, in making sure that, again, we pivot away from these D.C. consultants, get rid of all these bad contracts, get rid of all these old crotchety folks who, should have been let go 20, 30 years ago. We're playing with this antiquated playbook at the DNC and within their national party apparatus and pivot towards a political culture whereby we don't cede an inch to Republicans. And look, Ben Wickler is a fantastic chair in Wisconsin. Nothing I'm saying here diminishes anything he's done up there. But I felt that Ken Martin was best equipped to do what I'm talking about.
I am going to continue this conversation after we take a break. I'm talking with New York State Senator James Skoufis from New York's 42nd District. He is somebody who supported Ken Martin, who has been voted in as the new Democratic chair. You may have heard Ben Wickler was trying to get that job. James knows Ken very well, and we are going to continue to talk about Ken and the DNC and the direction for the Democratic Party when we come right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by New York State Senator James Skoufis, who represents New York's 42nd District. He was in the running to be the DNC chair. He decided to drop out. He put his support squarely behind Ken Martin, who had enough support that he was elected DNC chair this weekend on the very first ballot. We've been talking about what exactly the DNC chair does, in addition to being the fundraiser in chief. And I think that everything I've heard about Ken Martin, the fact that he has been able to create an atmosphere and run candidates that have succeeded in Minnesota in what were formerly considered red districts. Okay, let's figure out, Ken, how we expand that to the whole, or how Ken is going to expand that to the whole country. James, do you know, has he shared his plan with you?
Well, look, he's in day two of his transition, and one of the things that's really telling, because Ken's been a vice chair at the DNC for quite a number of years, and at first blush, it might have been surprising to folks to see his platform that spoke so heavily about reforming the DNC, that an organization that he was at least on paper that sat at the highest rung of leadership at, and he made it clear to me and his conversation with others that despite being a vice chair, can you believe this? And there are 4 vice chairs underneath the chair's position. Despite being a vice chair, one of the top folks in this 448-member organization, he had never seen a budget at the DNC in all of his years. And he was not part of, the core decision-making process. And he told me, if I don't know these things, if I haven't seen these things, the other 440-plus people certainly haven't at the DNC. And so it begins with making everyone feel like they're a part of this party again. And it's not just, like the Wizard of Oz. It's one guy behind a mask, behind a curtain, who's making all the decisions. Ken Martin is very clearly, at the highest level of confidence, going to be someone who steps out from behind that mask out from behind that curtain and make sure whether you are a local town committee member and pick your state around the country or one of the 448 members of the DNC, people are going to feel connected to this party again, bought in, have a seat at the table, and we're going to build a bigger, better, stronger party together. One person can't do it, and that requires a culture change.
Not only a culture change, but one thing that the listeners to this station have been sharing with me for years is this feeling that even when Democrats do good things, somehow people don't hear it, they don't take it in. The people who listen to this station have always wondered why it seems that Democrats cannot message as effectively as Republicans. And I mean, you know, Republicans, like I was reading when Barack Obama was elected, Republican leadership met in a private room at a D.C. restaurant, and it was like, what's our game plan? How are we going to thwart this guy? How are we going to oppose him? How are we going to make sure he has no success? And leadership got together, and, you know, they didn't want him to be a two-term president. They didn't succeed at that, and he did get some things done legislatively. But at least they came together, and there was a plan. And when Republicans... When Democrats do anything, Republicans are in front of the TV cameras. They're in front of the microphones. They're shouting loud and long the same message over and over and over again. They have a discipline and an organization that, frankly, Democrats don't seem to be capable of. Is that built into the fact that we're a big tent, so we will never be, you know, we will never be able to get our lawmakers to scream loud and long and complain about the same things so that it actually soaks through the media atmosphere and actually soaks into people? It doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, so it's hard to argue with anything that you just said, and we absolutely have to be better organized with our messaging. Our messaging has to be sharper, but I'll add two things to your list that you just rattled off that we really have to be laser focused on, and that I know Chairman Martin is laser focused on as he enters now, you know, day 2 or 3, depending on how you count the days, as the new DNC chair. And that is, one, you can have the sharpest, most well-organized message in the world. If you're not showing up in traditionally uncomfortable places to share that message, you're going to have a huge swath of folks who are not going to hear the message. And so this goes back to what I was talking about before. We can't just show up to, you know, our allies and the traditional places in the media ecosystem that we are most comfortable in, quite frankly. And, you know, it can't just be Pete Buttigieg going on Fox News. It can't just be, you know, I saw a graph not too long ago, a couple months ago, that looked at the political class broken down by party, which Democrats, which Republicans were most frequently participating on the major political podcasts in this country. We were and have been swamped. 90% of the major podcasts that talk politics in this country are being frequented by Republicans and not Democrats. And so, you know, we have to get out and fan out to everybody everywhere in this country, and that requires going into some uncomfortable places at times. And so, look, I think that it's all the things that you mentioned, but it requires a little bit of political courage. And the second piece here is, and I texted this to Ken Martin, several days ago. There was a New York Times cover story. At least on the digital version, it was the cover story, whereby Donald Trump just did a big rally out in Las Vegas to talk about taxes on tips. And do you know where he went right after that rally? He went to a craps table at a random casino down the road, and that was the photo. That was the front page photo in the New York Times. Donald Trump just standing next to regular people playing craps. How many top Democrats in this country have the ability to, I hate to say it, Donald Trump, he's a liar. He's literally a criminal. He's a lot of bad things. He's going to inflict a lot of harm on this country, again, as he takes on a second term. But a lot of folks view him as authentic. And that's the other piece when it comes to messaging. It's one thing to have a nice message and a sharp message and even be everywhere. You have to be able to break through with that message. And if voters feel that your message, no matter how sharp it is, went through 19 rounds of consultant redlining and went through focus groups and went through all these layers before the words came out of your mouth, people aren't going to respond well to it. And Donald Trump, you certainly can't accuse him of being very filtered. And he's able to go into places like that and appear, even though he's an out-of-touch billionaire, he can still appear and have that authentic sort of nature about himself where he can sidle up to someone at a craps table. How many folks at the top level of our party can do that? Ken Martin is a real person. He's going to instill that authenticity into as many candidates, many electeds as we possibly can and get them out into the real world again.
I think you made a really interesting point when you said that, Democrats were not getting out on the political podcasts. Sadly, when the Democratic governors called up Chuck Schumer to basically say, dude, you got to do more than you're doing, one of the things they talked about was all the different media platforms now. And Chuck Schumer told this meeting of the governors, well, Cory Booker's really good at that. We've put him in charge. And he put together a PowerPoint presentation to teach the other Democratic senators, like, here's Facebook. You should post once or twice a day. Here's TikTok. Here's Instagram. I mean, it just seems like there are so many right-wing podcasters. There's so much right-wing, far-right content out there. And, like somebody was saying, where's the left-leaning Joe Rogan? Where is that? It's like we're behind the times. I know that, I've been trying to figure out for my show, like how to multiply get out on different platforms with the broadcast, and it's technology that I'm trying to learn. But I'm not, if it were something that affected my legislative prospects, I would be hiring people smarter than me to just get it all done. Does Ken understand new media? What do you think he will do with that or for that?
He understands it deeply, and he understands it deeply in the sense of how important it is to getting back to a winning formula here. In fact, a number of the forums that we chair candidates participated in were specific to this very issue. Were hosted by creators, digital creators, and others. And so he absolutely understands it. He can speak to it. But he, like you, like a lot of folks in the Democratic Party, don't pretend as though we have the best, fullest grasp of what we're talking about here, new media and how to leverage it and how to get better at it. Look, I'm 37 and my campaign manager is 24. My campaign manager for my DNC run is 24, and he knows this stuff better than I do. And I think Ken Martin would tell you that there are people who are more knowledgeable and better equipped than he as a 51-year-old DNC chair is when we talk about how to leverage TikTok and YouTube channels and streaming to get our message out. But what he deeply understands is the need for and this is most important, the need for the DNC to empower the right folks who can successfully and effectively get our message out to voters who are either not hearing from us or not genuinely hearing from us when we're breaking through. And one of the I think fixes that's most obvious is and the Republicans do it differently than what I'm about to describe, is the model on the Democratic side when it comes to influencers, for example, is to, yes, they'll send them the check in some cases and they'll get paid by the national party. But with that check in the envelope or in the email as an additional attachment are the talking points that we want them to share with their membership, the folks who follow their pages, their audience, instead of, and look, all these folks, they've built their audiences with their own voice, with their own style, with their own emphasis on different issues. And when we send them talking points alongside that check for their services, they come off, again, going back to what I said before, they come off as inauthentic. And they're not resonating in the same way with the folks who follow them and make up their audience. We have to empower our teammates within this big Democratic tent to reach out to the folks that they know best. We don't know them best sitting in some office at the DNC. They know their audience is best, and that's just one of so many examples. Ken Martin gets it. We're going to do things very, very differently in the new media and digital space under his administration.
Will Ken Martin be out there front and center? I know it didn't seem like Jamie Harrison was in front of the television cameras very often, but I know previous heads of the DNC have been out there leading the charge. Do you think Ken will be more of a behind-the-scenes guy, or will he be out front as well?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Ken Martin is one of the best, strongest, most articulate surrogates that we have in our National Democratic Party. And so I would fully expect that he, alongside many, many others, are going to be forward-facing many times and making sure that we get our Democratic message out to the electorate. And so I don't think they're mutually exclusive, though. Certainly he's going to be the architect of so much of what happens operationally, certainly financially within the DNC. That doesn't preclude him, though, from being forward-facing many times as well.
Is there somebody, we've talked about Cory Booker. Clearly, I've become a huge fan of Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, who I think has been banging the drum. Is there anybody right now, either in Congress or in the Senate, who you think is really doing a great job of leading the charge?
There are many, and look, many is never going to be enough. Congresswoman Presley, I think, is extremely impressive and articulate. My home congressman, Pat Ryan, has demonstrated what it means to really bring patriotism and freedom to our messaging and our democratic values, and has overperformed consistently at the top of the ticket. You have Jared Golden up in Maine, and look, Jared Golden, it's interesting, and we all have our own unique situations as elected officials and candidates. Jared Golden has a longstanding policy of not doing national media interviews. But you know what? It works for him in rural Maine, and his voters see him as, he cares more about us than he does going on CNN and MSNBC, and it works in his district. And so, we have to be intelligent and sort of sensitive to local politics, and also making sure that we have the right surrogate for the right settings and venues. A media outlet may not work as well for me as it does with, Ruben Gallego. And look, Ruben Gallego is a perfect example of someone who had the audacity, I would say political courage, to break from the Democratic script on some key issues like immigration. He had the audacity to go out and not only seek but earn the Border Patrol Union's endorsement. And we know what happened at the Democratic top of the ticket in Arizona. We were unsuccessful. Well, he was successful, and we have to learn from candidates like him and Pat Ryan and Jared Golden and Congressman Presley and so many others. What did you do that the rest of us didn't do? I don't pretend to have all the answers. Ken Martin doesn't pretend to have all the answers. But one of the things that he is adamant about doing is making sure we're going to do a post-election review. We're going to bring everyone who did it right to the table and learn from them, because there's a lot to learn from what happened 2.5 months ago.
Well, that sounds like the best plan I've heard so far. Let's hope it works out the way we would love for it to work out. Ken Martin is the new DNC chair. We are talking with New York State Senator James Skoufis. He actually was in the running to be head of the DNC and stepped aside, and through his support to Ken Martin, who he just gave us a very interesting insight into and profile of. James, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, and thank you for what you do.
We are going to take a break for news and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Oh, God. You know, I shut off my mic during the news because nobody needs to hear me blow my nose. And yet, you got to remember to turn it back on. Isn't that amazing, Paul, how the technology works? You turn it on, and you turn it off, and you turn it on.
We need to get you an on-air light.
Well, part of the problem is I have readjusted my equipment, so the little red light, which used to shine right into my eyes, no longer does that. But now I realize why I had it set up the way I did. So is Brian here? Do we have Brian?
I am here, Joan, just silently laughing at the situation.
Yes. That's how most of my family, when they look at me, they're silently laughing. Brian Endless, who clearly is a master of technology and knows when his microphone is hot, and should be doing a radio show here at WCPT, teaches at Loyola University of Chicago. We have chatted before, but not for a while. First of all, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. Happy New Year, and thanks for having me back on.
It is my pleasure. I wanted to talk to you about this new project that you are putting together, the Come Together Project. Tell us about it.
And I thank you for it. This is something that started to strike me the first time Donald Trump was elected. And unlike a lot of my friends who, saw the political negatives, one of the things that really hit me was how much we got to hate each other in this country and how much we were canceling our friends, canceling our families. And that really resonated with me. I teach a class on capitalism and talked about some of these things in it. And one of the things that I realized is that we are fighting with each other for no good reason, especially on things like culture war issues. I think there are a small group of people who are pushing us to fight, pushing us to cancel each other, pushing us to fear each other, and we can do something about that. And I think that's a big part of the battle, as we have seen with this most recent election. The country's going in very different directions. I think there are a lot of people hurting. I think we have to bring everybody together on what we now call the left and the right in order to stop this fighting and make some real progress in the country.
I would like your advice. This isn't about, posting on social media. This is real world, real life. There is someone in my life who seems like a very sweet, very kind person who I found out a month or so ago voted for Trump. Now, I don't think they're MAGA. It's just her explanation was, I've always been a Republican, so I vote Republican. And right. I understand that there are people who simply can't imagine crossing over to the other side for any portion of their ballot, let alone the entire ballot. But at first I thought, well, am I a hypocrite for not just turning my back on this person and saying, no, we're done, I can't believe it. And then I thought, well, maybe do I talk to this person? Like, I have a feeling, Brian, that there are a lot of people who voted for Trump, low information voters who either, they didn't like something Joe Biden did, or they thought somehow, there was this big bit of misinformation that the economy was so great under Trump, as he was telling people that left and right. And I think there were some people who thought their lives would be better. There are some people who've grown up in Republican households who really, it's like growing up, I guess, as an evangelical and then suddenly breaking away. It's, you know,
Right.
you're part of this tribe. But, you know, do I ignore it, Brian? You know, I want to ask her, you know, okay, well, you know, did you know? You know, how do you feel about the fact that Elon Musk has been given all this power and all this information that, you know, and that the first thing he wants to do is destroy the agency that supports people around the world when there's a famine or when there's an outbreak? I mean, do I just let it go? Do I just count on the fact that when her life finally starts being impinged upon, then suddenly she'll look at things a little differently? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to come together with this person, Brian.
Let me see if I can help a little bit, because I've been listening to people for over a year now as we're putting this thing together. And I can say talking with or listening. I try not to say talking to people, because I've been trying to really figure out what makes people like your friend tick and why are we so different on these things. And what I've noticed is a couple of things. First, I'll start with saying you're not strange or wrong for this. You're kind of being Jeffersonian with the idea of, I try not to let politics get in the way of my friendships. And he said you'd never let politics get in the way. I think that's important for us. We've been trained since the 80s that we are two teams in this country. And this is a team sport, and it's a win-lose sport. And there's no way that we can both win. And I think there's some people profiting from that training, but it's not most of us. It's not you and I when we're doing it. What you see, though, when you have a friend like yours, my recommendation, and I've given this to a lot of people, and I've had several people try it out very successfully, is to try to take it upon yourself to listen to your friend. And it does sound like you've started to do that already. I think you've taken a step past what many people do. Instead of just canceling right out, instead of just arguing, you listen. When we go into these conversations and we see somebody that is wrong as far as we're concerned, we tend to want to fight instead of listen. I've done this with car drivers, cab drivers, and people that I meet. My friends are getting sick of it when they hear me do it on the street with random people. But I'm trying to figure out where people come from on these things. So I want to know why that person supports Trump. I want to get into their heads more. And it usually comes down to a few things. One is the reflex Republican, that they've just always been Republican, but that doesn't have to do it. There are things beyond that. The number one thing that I found is it really is the economy. And we have two very different economies in this country. One that a few people, top 10%, are really taking advantage of, and it was really booming. And the other that's been getting worse for 40 years, with inflation going up and wages not going up, housing going up massively more than inflation, food going up massively more. And there are a lot of people in this country hurting. And I think what Trump actually did was he noticed them. He told them that he sees their problems. I don't think he gave them any solutions. I don't think he's going to give them any solutions. But people in the Democratic Party and others didn't notice them. They fought against them. And we spend a lot of time telling people how to think, and they tend to reject that. I'd also suggest one of the big things is your people like your friend, the vast majority of people who vote for Trump, don't listen to this radio station. Mm-hmm. They listen to other news sources. And a lot of us just can't get past the fact that how can my friend not understand this? How can this person who is supposed to be smart not see what she's doing to other people, not see that USAID helps people, not see what they're doing to people who are marginalized, to people of color, to all these different groups? How can they not see how these culture wars things are hurting? And the answer is because they don't, for most part, they don't have information that shows them that. they don't see things that way at all. When they hear the word immigrant, they see fear, and they have fear of people taking their jobs, even if that makes no sense whatsoever in practical terms. They have been fed a steady diet of fear, and leaders for time immemorial have known that convinces people, and that changes their rationality. So we tend to forget, your friend may be perfectly rational, but if she or he has different information than you do, they're going to see the world differently and make different decisions. I think the number one thing to personally come together with other people is to get past our desire to fight and move into a desire to understand each other.
Well, that's good advice. I like that. And it's what I was kind of hoping you'd say, because my plan, if I have the courage to talk about politics at all, is going to be kind of like, what do you think so far? What is it that this new administration is doing so far that you think is really great? I have a funny feeling for a lot of Trump voters, the answer is going to be, I haven't really been paying attention yet. Because I think there's a lot of people, forget about bad information, I think there's a lot of people who have little or no information at all when it comes to politics.
I want to make a different suggestion, though, Joan. I want to suggest you change the subject. And that while listening to your friend, look for things that you already agree on. So even just saying, what do you think about Trump? I think it can be a good open-ended question, but at the same time, they might feel defensive about that. What I go to instead is, how do you feel about healthcare insurance companies? How do you feel about what insurance companies are doing to people in denying coverage that we should have and in letting people die for a profit? How do you care about our healthcare system where we don't get our choices of doctors on things? If it's somebody with kids, how do you feel about child care and the fact that we can't afford child care, that we're in a system that, two people having jobs and we spend most of one of their jobs on child care? There are a whole bunch of subjects like that. Housing costs, treatment of veterans comes up, opioids in states. I was in Ohio and opioids was a big topic. How we deal with those things are actually things we can agree on. And that's one of the premises that we have is we've got a giant landscape of things that most Americans can agree on and that most of us are massively affected by. But what we choose to focus on are the culture wars. And we're not going to win on those culture wars issues. I don't care what side you're on abortion or on DEI or anything else. When you get involved in a fight on that, you're probably going to lose, whichever side you're on. And you're going to lose because you're never going to agree on it. Nobody's ever going to get convinced. But what would happen if we start talking about the things that we all want and start to look at, hey, is this political party doing it? Because I don't think either political party is helping the vast majority of people. They're really just helping a few people at the top, and our economy's shown that for 40 years now.
One of the things that people always point to is that starting pretty much with Reagan, we started giving tax breaks to the rich to the point where we now have serious economic inequity. I mean, there's the very, very rich, and the middle class is a shadow of its former self, and then we have people who don't make very much money. Whenever that has happened in other countries, it has led to political instability. Do you think a winning message for Democrats going forward is, hey, here's an interesting idea. Let's tax the rich?
I'm not sure. I do think that taxation is incredibly important. One of the things I'm not sure about is I stopped being a Democrat under Clinton. And part of it was that I thought the party pulled too far toward the things that Reagan was doing in working with corporations. And nothing that's happened since that time has dissuaded me. I may like one party more than the other when it comes to my choices of who to vote for. That's clearly out there. But I don't think anybody in the current Democratic Party is going to fix it. Let's say you like Bernie's message or AOC's message or people like that, they're never going to be successful in the current political system that we have. They're going to be outliers in the current political system. I think rather this, to me, isn't something where we are trying to bring people together inside the political system. We're trying to make societal change. And I think bringing up Reagan is fantastic because, to me, a lot of it goes back to that. You mentioned taxes. Taxes under Eisenhower peaked at 88%, and we had a fantastic economy. Taxes when Reagan started were at 75%, and we strengthened the economy from that point. But I think what the 1980s brought in was a move toward individualism and a move toward greed. And that didn't exist in the same way before that point in time. You take Kennedy talking about community, talking about bringing us all together, sacrificing for the greater good, and that moved into the movie Wall Street, where greed is good. But we forget that was a joke. That was supposed to be bad.
Yeah.
That wasn't really the message.
Something that I want to talk about more. I've heard people say, in this idea of, we've sort of lost our sense of being able to communicate with people with different ideas. And that part of that is we've lost this sense of community. Exactly. There was a time when people were more involved in their communities, whether it was a volunteer group or some other, maybe they were involved with their local libraries. They were involved in their churches. They were involved in, craft groups where they would get together. That we seem to have lost that we don't do clubs anymore,
Right, 100%.
And that has helped with the divisiveness. Because it's when you're around a group of people who have disparate backgrounds and disparate interests, I think you become more tolerant of that and less in a silo.
That is 100% correct, and that is something that we're really pushing for. We want to move people back from individualism to community. And the more people I talk to, the more I realize this is a desire for people. While the 80s tried to teach us that we're all these greedy individuals, humanity is really a community animal. Human beings are community animals. We want that. We miss that when that's not there. We understand at a base level that makes our lives better. And I've gone out to a few communities. I'm going to do a lot more in the next year and talk to people. And that's one of the things that's really coming through. They're hungry for ways to get themselves back together. And a piece of it is people are afraid because they don't want to get drawn into uncomfortable discussions when they're there. So a first step for us is giving people tools to get past uncomfortable discussions. But then it's going to come down to building a movement that focuses on community and focuses not on profits and not on the things that only help a tiny number of people at the top who own the big corporations and own a lot of stocks, but look at the things that help all of us, and probably start at a local and state level before moving that to a national level. I started to say a little bit beforehand, one of the things that I really look at Reagan as just a genius, and it was the people after Reagan too, it was the contract with America in 1994, and a lot of the things that the Heritage Foundation and others have done behind the scenes. I may not like what they're doing, but the fact is they built a bench, and they built from the bottom up. They went into communities and got people elected to school boards and got people elected to local councils, and they set them up with messages. And we may hate book banning messages, the Moms for Liberty and other groups, but these groups didn't pop up out of nowhere. They have scripts that people have paid for. People like the Koch brothers have set up networks to create this stuff and to change our culture. And Reagan really set us on a course for a major change of culture. I think he had a social revolution in the 1980s, and I would suggest what we need is a social revolution to go back in the other direction to community.
Yeah. I want to ask you, I want you to put on your other hat for a second. I know that you, at Loyola University, you're the Director of African Studies and the African Diaspora, and I know you've been very involved in what's going on in the Great Lakes region of Africa, Rwanda specifically.
Absolutely.
Give us a summary of what we need to know about what's going on in that area, and are you concerned with this apparent Elon Musk move to completely eliminate USAID, completely shut it down, lock the doors, fire the folks who work there? Talk about both of those things, if you would.
I think you've got 2 hours. I'll try to put them into a few minutes each. You can decide how much you want to have me back later for these. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, gigantic country, half the size of the U.S., Rwanda's next door, and it's a postcard-sized country, the size of Vermont. But Rwanda is dominating politics in the Congo right now. There is a civil war that's been going on in the Congo since 1998, since shortly after the Rwandan genocide. That civil war has killed over 6 million people, and it is largely dominated by Rwandan influence in the region. The UN has reported on this, Human Rights Group has, the U.S. State Department knows it. Right now, over the past 3 months, that war has flared up again, and we have seen just in the last week 700 killed and hundreds of thousands turned into displaced people as a group of quote-unquote rebels called M23 has taken over one of the largest cities in eastern Congo, Goma, and they have been actively backed by the Rwandan government. Everybody knows that, except Rwanda, they don't admit this. Everybody else understands that Rwanda funds this group. Rwanda gives them support and orders. In this case, Rwanda has also sent in about 4,000 troops to support the 8,000 troops that M23 has, and they have taken over a big city in that region. The only reason this is happening, Joan, is conflict minerals. There are coltan, cobalt, tantalite, tin in that region that are insanely valuable in manufacturing, and the rebel groups have been shipping those on the black market from Congo into Rwanda since '98 now, and this has caused millions of deaths along the way, and we know very little about it except occasionally when it flares up like this. I will say on USAID, and then I'll let you get back if you have questions on that. USAID is one of the main funders of aid around the world. Congo is one of the top 5 places we send money. Ukraine, Gaza are all places that USAID isn't just important, it's essential to the lives of the human beings who are there. We are typically the leader in providing aid. Others provide it too, but USAID has a fantastic logistical and support network, and without our aid, we're going to see a huge number of people starving and dying in these regions who could have been saved with just the tiny, tiny amount of money that USAID provides to them every year. So gutting that saves pretty much nothing for the budget in effective terms, but it massively hurts human beings in other countries. This is really just a form of cruelty to do this, and nobody in the U.S. really seems to understand how bad it's going to be.
No, that's absolutely for sure. And people forget that, yes, it's wonderful if there's a crisis somewhere in the world and we step in with aid. But that aid is also referred to in political circles as soft power. When you help somebody out like that, you have influence over their government. Maybe you can, encourage them to be more aligned with the West rather than going to China for what they need. Because China's making a big push in Africa. Hey, you need help? We've got money. Be our friend. Don't be their friend. Be our friend.
This is one of the things I hope the administration realizes about Congo, both Goma and USAID. China already has mining contracts with the Congolese, mostly for diamonds and potentially some uranium, and we are in a trade war there. China's building infrastructure. We've been making inroads and progress, but if we drop all of our support, and for instance, we can get Rwanda to back off. We're Rwanda's closest ally. If we support an end to that conflict and push it and threaten to cut aid, we can make that conflict end, and we can look really good in that region, and soft power is exactly what it is. If we don't do that, we may be giving one of the biggest mineral suppliers in the world to Chinese influence, and that's something we need to be thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, it is always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Joan.
It really is. Brian Endless.
Can I do a quick plug for website? ComeTogetherProject.squarespace.com. Get more information, and we're all over social media, TikTok, Facebook, other places.
Oh, I'm new to TikTok. I'll look you up there.
Fantastic. I have been a content provider for a year and 3 months now, every single day, Joan. I've been doing 1-minute videos. I had to teach myself how to do them, and it's insane. The old dog has learned a new trick on this one.
Wow, I'm in awe. I dream of being that proficient. I'll work on it. I will. Dr. Brian Endless is the Director of African Studies at Loyola University Chicago. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very pleased to welcome back Controller Susana Mendoza, who we really originally wanted to talk about the government freeze. Remember, spending was frozen for everything, and then it was unfrozen, and then we were told that we were mistaken. It was never actually frozen at all, which is, gaslighting of the highest order. But I would like to know from our controller, Susana Mendoza, exactly what the state of Illinois can do to protect itself from this chaotic federal government that we have now. Susana, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Joan? It's so nice to hear your voice and be back on the show.
It's so nice to have you back here. You are always a breath of fresh air, and everything you say is so sensible. So give us advice on how to gird our loins here.
I know it's interesting times we're living in. These are really uncharted. We're going through uncharted territory, and uncharted, I should say, territory to be exact and correct. But it's, I will tell you that, what you said, I felt like we were playing tennis, right? Back and forth. It's like you're getting whiplash. I'm like, What is it? Was there a freeze? Was there not a freeze? They say there's not a freeze. I can just assure you there was a freeze because the state of Illinois was locked out of the federal system that would allow us to submit payments for Medicaid and therefore be able to submit our request for reimbursements. I received that day multiple calls from or texts from hospital CEOs completely in a panic about whether or not this was really happening for the state because they were frozen out of the federal Medicaid portal. And when you're talking about Medicaid, you're talking about the most vulnerable people across the country who receive care for medical services, people with disabilities, people in extreme poverty. And, disease and disability certainly does not differentiate between Democrats and Republicans. So the amount of pushback that the Trump administration got once people started realizing that they were, in fact, locked out of Medicaid, I think was significant. And so this concept that it was a glitch or that it was,
that was my favorite. No, we didn't know. We didn't do anything about that. It was just a coincidence.
Sure, right? So it was the truth is they were either grossly incompetent or, super cruel. And, either one of those two options is not a good option. So thankfully that has been temporarily, I would say, rescinded. And it's not because they chose to. I mean, if they would have, in fact, said we're okay with all this federal funding going out the door and it was a mistake, then they wouldn't have been trying to petition a judge to side with them instead of with the state's attorneys across the country who came together to ask for this temporary restraining order. And thankfully, this federal judge did, in fact, side with goodness here and protecting people and went ahead and issued this temporary restraining order. But, you know, I think it's important that people realize that this is just the beginning of the Trump administration's really kind of attack on vital programs and the people who need them the most. And again, I think it's just bad strategy because you're talking about Americans of all political persuasions. They're just trying to get by, and they rely on federal programs in ways that they may not even realize that they do.
You know, some people have said that what he's been doing is sort of like testing, like, you know, doing something that is, of course, not only unprecedented, but almost always illegal, to see if he'll get any pushback, to see just, you know, the fascist dictators do this. You know, they keep pushing, they fought back on this, but they didn't fight back on this. So I'm going to push a little more over here. That what we're seeing now is kind of like Trump testing the waters of how much resistance there's going to be. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, Joan, I would not say it's kind of like, it is exactly that. And these are trial balloons that were put out there, some of which, you know, they may be surprised by how much they can get away with. And then they may also be surprised with what they can't get away with, right? And again, when you're hitting areas where, like I said, disease and disability doesn't pick political parties or preference, it just picks people. And a lot of those people are his voters. And they're like, this is not what I signed up for, right? Mm-hmm. So, look, everybody can think that they want to create. Yeah, you've heard me on your show many times. I'm a fiscal, you know, hawk. I'm a fiscal watchdog. I take pride in trying to stretch the value of every dollar to work hard for taxpayers because it's not my money, it's their money. Sometimes to the disdain of my own party, right, where I come out and say we need to be more fiscally disciplined. But the reality of it is I have a track record of looking for efficiencies everywhere we can find them without compromising service to the people that we serve, because I truly believe that we could provide better service at lower cost, and that is a reflection of my respect for the hard work of taxpayers. So I'll be the first person to say where we can trim our belt, tighten our belt, you know, trim the fat, tighten our belt, and still provide those quality services. That's showing respect for taxpayers. Having said that, what he did was take like a blowtorch or drop a nuke across the country, metaphorically speaking, of course, in terms of the stability and predictability that taxpayers should have from their government at the federal level. It created chaos and panic and disruption instead of providing stability and predictability and trust, right? So you can think that you're all about efficiencies and you can applaud this guy for what they're doing until it's your kid that needs that cancer treatment that doesn't get it anymore. And then you're going to be like, whoa, hold on. You know, it's not supposed to happen to my family, right? And so I think what you're seeing from Democrats is that we're saying every American or every person living and breathing in this country should be concerned about this direction. This is not what people signed up for. I don't think it's what most reasonable people signed up for.
No, and I'm so tired of hearing that from people, you know, who get sold this message, we're going to cut the fat, we're going to cut the waste. And I don't know what people, when they vote for somebody like that, think, you know, well, when I go to the DMV, there's usually 6 clerks. Maybe next year there'll only be 5. And, you know, maybe that's a cost savings, or maybe that means I sit for another hour. But I've heard so many people, you know, who get sold on this, we're going to cut the waste, we're going to cut the fat. And then all of a sudden it's so much easier to cut a social program. One of my friends once voted for a Republican who was, you know, we're going to be pro-business. And a program that her son needed was one of the first things he cut. And she actually looked at me and she said, well, I didn't think he was going to cut that, because that's what Republicans do. Yeah, that message, we're going to cut the fat, that sounds so great. But before you vote for somebody like that, ask them to tell you, what do you see as the fat? Where is the fat? Tell me 3 things that you think are wasteful that you're going to get rid of. Because I think people are always like, well, wait a minute, not that, you know.
Yeah, cut there, but not here, right? So, I mean, realistically speaking, there's always places, for the most part, that you can trim without sacrificing services. In fact, you can sometimes provide better services by getting rid of a lot of the, repetitive inefficiencies and stuff like that. But, this guy has certainly not earned the trust of people to trust him on doing that. Elon Musk coming in and just imploding everything, there's zero trust factor right there. Look how he treats his own employees. I mean, you think he's going to have the best interest of regular Americans at heart? Yeah. I don't think so. So they haven't earned that yet. And I do believe that, elections are important and they have consequences and they give powers, but they don't give unlimited powers. And this is not a monarchy. It's a democracy. And so it is very, very scary that 3 to 4 of the richest people in the universe, literally, right, are in control of our government and calling the shots. And it's a scary time that we're living in, but, it's also, like I said, it's uncharted, and we've got to figure out how to get through certainly these next 2 years, really this next year. And it's going to be interesting because obviously Illinois has some serious, financial challenges ahead of us, even in the best of circumstances. And then now to think that they could be looking at the next budget season as one in which they just slash federal funding to all blue states, and just create massive panic and chaos. I don't know how that helps our country, but we've got to prepare, I think, hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yeah. I'm talking to Controller Susana Mendoza. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Controller Susana Mendoza is here with us, and we have been talking about the hiring freeze that almost was but then wasn't. What can you do, Susana, to prepare yourself when, it's not like, I guess maybe, if we look at Project 2025, that gives us an idea of what's coming. But so much of this administration seems to be shoot from the hip. Oh, I woke up this morning with a great idea. Let me tweet it out and make sure, it becomes part of the government. I don't know how you prepare to protect Illinois from that kind of chaos.
Yeah, well, you have to be nimble, right? You have to be forward thinking. And, as far as my office is concerned, I'm super closely monitoring the situation. And we're going to do the one thing that we're really good at, and that's keep getting payments out as fast as humanly possible. I'll tell you what, one of my, super proud moments was when this horrible chaos erupted that the bond buyer called me and asked, how many Medicaid bills are you guys sitting on? And I said 0. I literally got every single bill out the door on Thursday, and we received our entire federal match the day before the freeze. And so she's like, oh, my goodness, did you see this coming? And I said, look, I'm good, but not that good. I go, but this is how I've been managing the state's finances from day one, even during the budget impasse. It was always prioritizing the most vulnerable people and taking advantage of federal matches as quickly as humanly possible. So it's the opposite of what controllers before me did. It's how I've talked to you before about paying down the bill backlog and paying it down before getting any federal ARPA in the door, because I've just been managing the money as best as humanly possible for taxpayers. So I don't know what other states were like, but I know that there was panic across the country. But here in Illinois, I literally didn't have any bills to pay with Medicaid because they were already out the door, and we had already received our refund. Having said that, if that freeze would have continued, it would have put every state in a very precarious situation. So as we go into this next budget season, Joan, it's really going to have to be, we're going to have to probably have multiple types of budgets in place. One that is a catastrophe budget, another that's just like a normal kind of bad budget with limited revenues and potential, hole in the budget that we have to plug, which means where do you tighten up, without sacrificing services or the least amount of pain. And then, hopefully a normal, somewhat positive moving forward growth related budget. So not growth in terms of new spending, but, economic growth potential for the state of Illinois. And so I think that the governor knows that he's got a really tough job this year relative to other years where we've been in a much better situation. But really the hardest part of this job right now for the legislature and for the governor is trying to predict what's unpredictable. But I actually don't think it's unpredictable. I think we can predict chaos. Mm-hmm. And so you have to prepare for that. Prepare for a worst-case scenario but hope that it doesn't end up being as bad as we think it might potentially be. So, it's math at the end of the day, Joan, right? You've got to figure out how much money's coming in, what's going to be taken away, and then have the honest conversations with the legislature and the public as to what's affordable and what's not.
When you say this next budget season that to really prepare, there probably need to be several different budgets. And one of those you mentioned was a catastrophe budget. Would you foresee,
budget, right?
Yeah, something like that being, okay, what if we get absolutely no money from the federal government? What would that look like? What would our income be? What would we fund at that point? Is that as catastrophic? It seems pretty catastrophic.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you have to at least think about, in a worst case scenario, what would your budget look like, right? And have that discussion, because the reality of it is that right now, at this moment in time, as we go to craft our budget, the Republicans are in control of every chamber. They have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the president. And even for those Republicans who might normally go off the reservation, because, every party has their extremists, right, who under no circumstances want to go with the administration, I have a hard time believing that in this climate, there's any Republican who, if push comes to shove, will bail on Donald Trump, on President Trump. So the one thing they might hate more than having to toe their party line is Democrats. And so I think that's the unifying factor in trying to, potentially just shut down government. It's really reminiscent, if you think about it, to our budget impasse under Bruce Rauner. But this is at a federal level. So we've seen this play out before. So Illinoisans should not be naive about what could potentially be coming down the pipeline. And if we don't prepare for a doomsday scenario and start having these conversations with the public, then kind of shame on us for, not understanding that we can be back there again. We're not going to be back there as a state because of something we did to ourselves, but we're a blue state. In a state where, they love to beat up on Illinois, they love to pound on Chicago and make an example out of our state, and so we're not in a situation where they're going to be looking to give our leaders the benefit of the doubt as they craft their really cruel budget moving forward. So I could totally see them trying to strip of us all kinds of federal funding, shifting those dollars to other red states as an example. And we have to assume that even with a $3.2 billion projected budget deficit, without this nonsense happening, that's bad enough. But then add to that potentially losing billions in federal funds, we're looking at a very precarious situation moving forward.
If Donald Trump, who loves revenge and retribution, if Donald Trump does decide that maybe federal funds should only go to red states, could we stop paying our taxes? Because if we're not going to get money back from the federal government, it seems to me we should no longer be sending money to the federal government. So I would like your permission, if that happens, to stop paying my taxes.
Well, I can't give you that permission, but you know what's extra insulting in this whole equation is that it's the blue states that keep these red states fiscally solvent. Illinois has been a donor state
we hear from Southern Illinois, we want to secede, if maybe we should be part of Indiana. And I'm like, you want to join one of the poorest states in the nation and give up all that money that comes your way from Chicago? There's a part of me that's, okay, kids, you go with God. See how that works out for you.
Yeah, it will not work out well. But again, in this case, it's one of these situations where Illinois, New York, California, Connecticut, these are all, Delaware, they're all states that are net givers to the rest of the country, the red states. So all of those states are essentially welfare states, but they pretend that they're fiscally responsible. And they don't even have the common courtesy to say thank you to the blue states for keeping them afloat. Meanwhile, our state, on average, I think it's like $5 billion that we give extra in federal taxes that we don't get to benefit from because they're going to Kentucky or Alabama or some other red state who then turns around and talks about how we're so bad with money. The only reason they have money is because we're sending it to them. And so now it's going to add insult to injury that if the president wants to punish blue states with his retribution and send money to red states, they're going to, on top of what we already give them, they're going to have even more. They're still not going to know what to do with it because they're not known for being really well run. But Illinois is going to have to work that much harder just to stay afloat. So it's, I'm hopeful that, something will work itself out, that we've got Democrats who are going to be fighting the good fight at the national level. But, it'd be naive of me to also lie to people and say that this is not a very, very serious situation.
Thank you so much, Susanna. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you. And I have a feeling as the chaos unfolds in D.C., we're going to be talking a lot more about, well, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? But I'm glad that you are there and that you're on top of things. I think that's exactly what we need right now. And thank you for being here.
No, my pleasure. I can tell you that, that 2-year budget impasse and everything I had to do to, get through that and get our state through that, I guess it was practice for what's coming. So this is not something that will make me panic or make me lose my cool. We're ready to do whatever we need to do to stand up for Illinois. And, they give us a bag of rotten lemons. We're going to make some delicious lemonade. At least that's the hope, right? We got to figure it out. So we'll figure it out. I know that there's people working hard for everybody in this state, and we'll do what we can to get us through it. We'll get through.
Controller Susanna Mendoza, thank you for being here. I appreciate the interview. That's going to do it.
Have a great day.
You too. That's it for me today. Driving it home with Patty Vasquez is, of course, coming up at 5 o'clock. She's going to be joined by guest co-host Elliot Serrano, and that should be a lot of fun. Tomorrow on Choose Views, Richard will be joined by Holly Kim, candidate for Lake County Treasurer, and a bunch of other folks. And this Friday, Richard's kicking off a new segment this month with the mayor. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is going to be joining him on a regular basis. Oh, interesting. So text in all those questions that you want Richard to ask the mayor. I will see you tomorrow. Joel Ostro is going to be here, and we're going to do one of those fun media segments with Mark Jacob and Jennifer Schulze. Always a good time. Take care, my friends. Have a great evening, and good night.